Hello, everyone. My name is Rodrigo Souza, and I'm a Senior Program Manager with the Azure Cosmos DB team. Today in this presentation, we'll talk about two brand new features. The first one is Azure Cosmos DB Analytical Store CDC, Change Data Capture. And the other one is our brand new Power BI connector. It's our V2 connector with direct query support. With me today, I have Revin. He's a principal engineer manager with the Cosmos DB team. Revin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Revin Chalil. I'm one of the engineering leads from the Cosmos DB team. Happy to be here to talk about these new features that we have recently released in preview.
Yes. So let's get started. Our agenda today, first we'll see what is Analytical Store. Then we'll see what is change data capture for Analytical Store and the advantages of CDC from Analytical Store. And Revin will do a demo about it. Right after, we'll see what is the Azure Cosmos DB V2 connector for Power BI. And then, very important, what to use when, because those are all analytical related features, right? So what to use when. And then I will do a small demo about it. At the end, I'm going to share a couple of links that may help you to get started. So let's go. What is Azure Cosmos DB Analytical Store? Your Cosmos DB data today, it's stored in what we call transactional store. It's a row store oriented, and that's where all your documents are stored today. But we understood customers really need analytical requirements, and for that we created Analytical Store. It's part of the Azure Synapse Link solution, a cloud-native 8-step solution for analytics, where when we automatically sync your transactional data into a columnar format optimized for analytics. So a couple of advantages. So Analytical Store is analytical ready in an analytical ready format, and we don't use your RUs, your request units, to sync the data from transactional into Analytical Store. Also, you won't use your RUs to read from Analytical Store using Azure Synapse runtimes. With Azure Synapse SQL Serverless, you have access to the full T-SQL language to analyze your data in Cosmos DB, and including joins, what is not possible today with Cosmos DB SQL language. The whole solution is fully managed by Cosmos DB, so you don't need to worry about ETL jobs, storage, and things like that. And you have independent ETL from transaction and Analytical Store, meaning that you can keep your transactional data for a couple of weeks, months, years, and maybe to retain your analytical data forever, for years. This whole solution allows customers to reduce the costs with no impact in your transactional workloads. So you don't need to provision RUs for analytical workloads on your transactional store anymore. Also, the last advantage, the cost per gigabyte is a fraction of transactional store. So really cheap, very effective. And now let's invite Revin to explain CDC for Analytical Store.
Thanks, Rodrigo. The CDC feature that we recently announced in preview is based on the Analytical Store, and so it does not consume RUs and guarantees throughput isolation without affecting the transactional workloads. It allows you to consume a continuous incremental feed of change data from Analytical Store and then write to diverse targets such as Azure SQL, Azure Data Explorer, Delta Lake, etc. And so this providing you the flexibility to use Cosmos DB data on analytical platform of your choice. It also supports applying filters and projections on the change feed via a source query. And so you can say you can enable the CDC for the entire container, or you can say I want to enable CDC for field 1, field 3, and field 5, where field 7 equal to ABC. Right? So you can provide a query and we will enable CDC for the results that satisfy that query criteria. It also supports capturing deletes and intermediate updates. So if a record gets deleted from Cosmos DB container after it has already been written into one of the sinks, we will provide a tombstone record that will uniquely identify the record in sink, and it can be deleted from the sink as well. It also captures intermediate updates, meaning that if there are multiple updates for a given record, then you do have the option to capture all the versions of the updates in the sink. There is also the ability to filter the change feed for a specific type of operation. So you can say, I wanted to enable change feed just for insert and delete, for example. You can start the change feed. You can start the change feed from the beginning of the container, or from a given timestamp, or from now. The CDC is seamlessly integrated with Azure Synapse and Azure Data Factory. And so you get that no-code, low-touch experience. Back to you, Rodrigo.
Great. So it allows customers to materialize, to persist their data into a centralized data lake, data warehouse, whatever. Well, it doesn't matter the database they want to use, right? Mm-hmm. So again, the key advantage for Analytical Store CDC, the low-code, no-code perspective. Also, it doesn't consume your RUs, so you don't have to provision RUs for CDC as you have to do for change feed from transactional store. And the performance as well, right, Ravi? So we did a couple of tests, and Analytical Store CDC has a much better performance than Cosmos DB change feed from transactional store, right? So, Ravi, now I think it's time for your demo.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rodrigo. Yeah, let me share my screen. This is a simple demo to enable CDC on a given Cosmos DB container, and then write to one of the sinks. Right. In this case, I'm using Delta Lake as the sink, but you can use any of the supported sinks. So in this case, on the source, I'm on the Azure Data Factory data flows, and then on the source side, I have selected Cosmos DB for NoSQL as the inline dataset type, and I do have a link service that I pre-created pointing to a Cosmos DB container, and then I have selected the store type as analytical. And then on the source options, I have selected the entire container here. But as I mentioned before, you also have the option to select provide a source query with the projections and filters as well. And then as I mentioned before, you can start from beginning, or from a given timestamp, or from now. This config specifies if you want to capture intermediate updates or not. And then with the capture deletes and the capture transactional TTL, you do have the options to include or exclude those records as well. On the sink, I have selected Delta as the inline dataset type. There is a link service pointing to a ADLS Gen2 account. And then it's pointing to a path called item here. And our source container was item. It's an Analytical Store enabled container. It is empty right now, but we will ingest some data into this container and then enable CDC on that container, which will write the incremental data into the Delta. And then on the sync side, again, on the update method, I have selected all the operations here, but you can selectively select the operations that you would need. For example, you can just select insert and upsert, and then exclude deletes and updates. The RID is an internal field that uniquely identifies records in Cosmos DB. And so that's a key field that's being used for applying deletes and asserts. So that's pretty much the setup on the data flow. And I have a simple app that ingests some data into the item container. So this is the same Cosmos DB container which we used in the source settings here. And this will ingest 1,000 documents into the container and then sleep for a minute and then do that 3 times. So I'll start this, which will ingest 1,000 record in the first iteration. And then while that's getting inserted, I'm going to enable the CDC here. You can see here. And so I'm going to add a trigger. I have a trigger. So that this trigger executes in every minute. And so I'm going to start this. Let me make sure we have some data coming in here. So I do see some data is getting ingested. So I'm assuming it completed the first execution. So it has 1,000 records. And so I'm going to enable this trigger right now. And so it will be starting in the next minute. And we expect that the records that got ingested in the item container here will be picked up by this CDC. And as we ingest the next iterations, we'll be picking up those new records that's coming in as well. All right, so it started. So it's running right now. And you can see that it picked up 2,000 records from the Analytical Store, and then it wrote those 2,000 records into the Delta, right? And so the ingestion has completed the 3rd iteration, meaning I expect the next execution of this trigger picking up those new 1,000 record that we got that just got added. So the first execution completed. As you can see, it took 34 seconds, and the second execution is progress. And hopefully we will see those new 1,000 records being picked up. Okay, so that was the first one. Oh, looks like the second execution may have started a little bit earlier than the ingestion to the Cosmos DB container was complete. So let's see if the next execution picks that up. Okay, so the immediate next execution has picked up the 1,000 records, and so all the 3,000 records that got inserted into the container has been ingested into the Delta Lake. And so just to cross check, we can do a count query from here. So this is I'm querying the Delta sync where we ingested these CDC records. And so we expect to see 3,000 records here. Yeah, and so we do have 3,000 records here. And so that And so basically, we manage the checkpoints internally and then pick up any incremental records that come into the Cosmos DB container. And so just to show the deletes, how the deletes are getting affected in the or reflected in the sync, I'm just going to delete a record from here. And one of the next execution will identify this deleted record, and then it will get deleted from the Delta sync as well. So you can see we have the CDC job executing at every minute, and it typically completes in around 30 seconds. There was one execution which took 43 seconds, but typically it's usually in the 35 seconds range. And so this particular execution picked up the deleted record. So this will be a tombstone record, and so this will be deleted from the Delta as well. And so you can see here. So this is deleted from here as well. And so this query, this query will show 2,999 records here. So that's a simple demo showing enabling CDC on a container, and then ingesting or writing the data, the incremental data continuously into a sync with deletes, incremental updates, etc., being reflected on the sync. That's it. Over to you, Rodrigo.
Thank you, Revin. Now, let's talk about the brand new Azure Cosmos DB V2 connector for Power BI. This new connector has support for direct query and data flows. With direct queries, we enable customers to do real-time BI on Cosmos DB data, meaning that as soon as the data is ingested, you can start to analyze the data with Power BI dashboards. And now, instead of doing imports, you can run queries in real time. These queries now support aggregations. Aggregations are pushed down to Cosmos DB, but for now, in partition aggregations, meaning that you have to provide a partition key to be able to send the aggregation down to Cosmos DB. And we'll show you how to do it in the demo in a few slides. Also, it's interesting because you can create transformations in your queries and enable Power BI data flows with these transformations and share the information, the curated information across their organization. But now, since we have Synapse Link, Power BI connector, the new connector, the old connector, what to use when? So let's see what are the options for analytics in Cosmos DB today. The first option I want to talk about is the old V1 connector. This is our legacy version now, and you should upgrade to V2 when possible. The V2 connector we just presented, it's suggested for real-time BI on your NoSQL API original data. Why original? Because it doesn't read data from Analytical Store. It doesn't read data from the columnar version of your data. It reads your original documents. It supports scenarios with in-partition aggregation. So you know what is the partition key, and you want to submit an aggregation to the database. Also, you can do joins on the Power BI side. So if you have customers and orders, you have to import this data into Power BI and do the joins in the data model tab. And all of your queries running against your Cosmos DB will use your RUs. So you're gonna be sharing throughput, RUs, between OLTP and OLAP workloads. The next option is Azure Synapse Link for Cosmos DB. This is it's recommended for near real-time analytics on NoSQL, MongoDB, or Grammarly API data. And it's on top of Analytical Store, so that's your columnar data. You don't have any restriction on aggregations, and you can do joins between your collections, right? Using Azure Synapse SQL Serverless or Azure Synapse Spark. The throughput that you're gonna use for Synapse Link isn't in your OLTP total throughput. So you don't have to provision throughput for your OLAP workloads. Your OLAP queries will happen in Synapse. The last option we have today is the Azure Cosmos DB or DBC connector. So you should use this option when you can't use Power BI and you can use Synapse Link. So that's the last option you have for that. Now, before the demo, I want to show you the blog post we have for the Power BI connector. And in this blog post, you see all the information you need to understand with more details what is this new capability of Cosmos DB, how it works. And we have also a step-by-step guide so that you can learn how to use this new connector. It's here in our blog post. And this blog post will link you to our detailed how-to guide on how to use the Cosmos DB V2 connector, including the most important thing here is the capability to use a partition key value as a parameter for your query. So you are able to push down your aggregations using this dynamic filtering capability we have in Power BI. With that, let's get started with our small demo. This is my Power BI desktop, and when I click on Get Data, Power BI will open this window where I can type Cosmos DB. And here we can see the V2 connector. But I already have a report ready to be used in this demo. But before the graphs here and the dashboards, I would just want to show that in the data model, the model view tab, that's where you're going to have the telemetry collection, that's a regional collection, and another data set that was created from the telemetry collection without duplicates on the partition key of the container. And I name it this view of the data as unique partition keys. And what we do is to bind the partition key as a filter. And where is this filter? It is this slicer I have here in my Power BI dashboard. So all these values here are the unique partition keys I have, and all these other visuals are connected to this value, the value I'm using here. And as you can see, I have a whole bunch of aggregations. The max speed, the average speed, the count, the sum. So when I change the parameter in real time, there is the aggregations, all these aggregations are being submitted to the Power BI container, to the Cosmos DB container, to the database itself, running in partition aggregation, right? So this is the small demo I want I would like to show with these aggregations in real time. With that, I'm going to return to the presentation and share with you the links we have to help you get started with these new technologies. The first link is for our Cosmos DB V2 connector documentation. The second link for the Analytical Store CDC. And we have another link with all Synapse Link related links. That's all we have today. Thank you so much.